How's everyone, Grant here. Welcome back to another camera comparison video. This time I've got the Samsung Galaxy A51 up against the Redmi Note 8 Pro. Now at the time of this recording, both of these phones can be found for under $300, so I'll leave the purchase links in the description should you choose to pick these up for yourself. Now each of these have a quad camera setup on the rear. The A51 has a 48 megapixel main wide-angle sensor with a 12 megapixel ultra wide-angle sensor and backed by 5 megapixel macro and depth sensors. The Redmi Note 8 Pro has a 64 megapixel main wide-angle shooter with a 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera and backed by 2 megapixel macro and depth sensors. So fairly similar quad setups on the rear. You've got a 32 megapixel front camera on the A51 and a 20 megapixel front camera on the Note 8 Pro. So a very capable set of cameras on paper, but I'll be shooting a bunch of photos and videos like I always do, and these will be in good daylight conditions. I'll be doing a separate low-light camera comparison, so stay tuned for that. And unless otherwise noted, everything is shot in full auto mode. So I'll let you go ahead and take a look at all the photos and videos for yourself, and I'll come back at the end and let you know what I thought about how each of these cameras performed. Hi everyone, so we're in the park testing out these cameras here. This is 1080p 30 frames per second on both the Galaxy A51 and Xiaomi Redmi Note 8 Pro. So there's a lot of blue sky and a lot of greenery here, so hopefully this gives a good idea of the color reproduction and how each of these cameras are performing. And so I can go ahead and pan over to the right and test some zoom out. So let's see if we can get 2x zoom here on the Redmi Note 8 Pro. There we go. And let's see if we can get 2x zoom on the Galaxy A51. And so the Redmi Note 8 Pro can go all the way up to, I believe, a 6x digital zoom. And there it is, 6x digital zoom on the Note 8 Pro. And the Galaxy A51 can go all the way up to an 8x digital zoom. So that's what both of these look like here. Let's zoom it back out. All the way back out on the Note 8 Pro and on the A51. And so let's go ahead and test some autofocusing, first with the Note 8 Pro here on the post. So that's some pretty quick lock on the autofocus there. Really nice depth of field with that black background blur. And one more time on the Note 8 Pro. So very good autofocus here on the Note 8 Pro. Now on the A51, also really speedy autofocus there. Also some nice shallow depth of field and some nice background blur. And the last time on the A51. So there you go. And let's go ahead and test some stabilization and walk down these stairs. So at 1080p, I'll think both of these phones are going to start looking pretty good here. But you let me know what you think about the stabilization here on both of these phones. And we'll end it here with one last pan around the park. See how it does into the changing light and how that exposure handles as that light changes. Here is another video sample. The Redmi Note 8 Pro can film in 1080p 60 frames per second, but I don't see that option here on the Galaxy A51. No 60 frames per second recording from what I can see on the Galaxy A51, but I did want to compare them so you can kind of see what the 60 frames recording versus the 30 frames recording at 1080p look like between the two phones here. So again, same scene in the park. Again, Redmi Note 8 Pro 1080p 60, the Galaxy A51 1080p 30 frames per second. So let's just do a quick autofocus test here at 1080p 60. So looks like the Note 8 Pro is still pretty quick to autofocus here. A little bit longer focus time there, and a little bit longer refocus, but autofocus still works there. So that's just a quick example here. And I'll do a stabilization so we can see how the 60 frames per second stabilizes or not on the Redmi Note 8 Pro. So you'll know if you want to use 60 frames versus a standard 30 frames per second and how that compares to the Galaxy A51 here. So that's just a quick 60 frames versus 30 frames per second comparison between the two phones. So here you are again. This is some quick wide angle footage, so ultra wide angle cameras on both the Note 8 Pro and A51. This is at 1080p 30 frames per second. Just to give a quick idea of how much more you can fit into the frame on both of these cameras. Now the A51 seems like it has a wider field of view here. You can see the tower in this shot and you can't see that on the Note 8 Pro. So a little bit more that you can fit in the frame on the A51. And pan around there, you can see. So again, just a quick wide angle view here from both cameras, just for a quick comparison here at 1080p. And here's a 4K comparison. This is both being shot at 4K 30 frames per second on each phone. Again, same scene in the park, so you can compare color reproduction and everything else at the other resolutions and frame rates. So again, quick pan over here to the tower, test the zoom at 4K. So that is a 2x zoom on the Note 8 Pro and 2x on the A51. So let's see what the max zoom here is in 4K. So you still get a 6x digital zoom in 4K on the Redmi Note 8 Pro. You can see the plane in the background there. And still get 8x digital here at 4K on the A51. So we can track that plane a little bit. So we'll zoom back out on both. There it is on the Redmi Note 8 Pro and on the A51. So some autofocus tests here at 4K. So Note 8 Pro, pretty quick to autofocus and refocus on the post. Really nice blurred background there on the Note 8 Pro, and last time really quick autofocus on the Note 8 Pro. Galaxy A51, there it is, refocus back on the post. So pretty snappy, but I don't think as snappy as the Note 8 Pro Still a nice blurred background, but I think the Note 8 Pro has a little bit more of that shallow depth of field. And last time with the A51. So I think the Note 8 Pro definitely is a faster autofocus. And that's that stabilization here at 4K. So again, walk down the stairs. See how these both stabilize at 4K. And again, quick exposure test as I pan across the park into some of that afternoon light. See how it adjusts its exposure to the changing lighting conditions there. So here we go with a 4K ultra wide angle test. The Redmi Note 8 Pro cannot shoot with the ultra wide angle camera in 4K. So it is shooting in 4K, but with the standard wide angle lens. The Galaxy A51 is obviously in the ultra wide angle mode, being shot at 4K 30 frames per second. So again, you can shoot at 4K ultra wide angle camera on the A51, but you cannot do that on the Redmi Note 8 Pro. But this is how the 4K footage will compare from the standard wide on the Note 8 Pro and the ultra wide on the A51. And again, sorry if you're hearing some background noise, but that can't be helped here. So just a quick sample footage at 4K between the standard wide angle on the Note 8 Pro and ultra wide on the A51, just to show you not only the color reproduction but also the field of view here and how much you can fit into frame on the A51. So that's kind of how these compare at 4K between the different lenses. And here is the front-facing camera being shot at 1080p 30 frames per second on both phones. So just want to give you a quick idea of how these cameras would perform in an outdoor setting like this. We're in the afternoon. It's a little bit of shade, not full blown out afternoon sun. So this is what you expect from each of the front-facing cameras here. And I can even pan around. You can kind of see what that looks like as the light changes a little bit, how it handles the exposure. And I'll go ahead and walk around here so you can also see how the stabilization is on the front-facing cameras between the Redmi Note 8 Pro and the Galaxy A51. So take a look at this footage, check out the color reproduction, stabilization, how it handles exposure and all that, and just let me know how you like each one, how they both sound, which one looks better to you. So again, just a quick front-facing camera comparison, 1080p from the Galaxy A51 up against the Redmi Note 8 Pro. And here we go with one more test on the front-facing camera. The Galaxy A51 can actually shoot in 4K resolution, 4K 30 frames per second. The Redmi Note 8 Pro max resolution is 1080p, but I thought I would shoot this on the Galaxy A51 in 4K so you can see how that resolution compares to the 1080p of the front-facing camera on the Note 8 Pro. So this is what you can expect if you want to shoot at 4K on the Galaxy A51. Let me know what you think about this and how it compared to the 1080p footage. But again, I'll walk around so you can see what stabilization is like at 4K from the A51 on the front-facing camera and how that compares to the 1080p resolution on the Redmi Note 8 Pro. So again, quick comparison here, 4K versus 1080p. Let me know what you think of the Galaxy A51 here and the Redmi Note 8 Pro. Hey everyone, so now that you've seen all the photos and videos for yourself, I'll let you know what I think about how each of these cameras performed. Let's start with the rear cameras. Photos on each of the main lenses looked pretty good, with the A51 producing more vibrant colors and its Scene Optimizer mode or AI mode not really making much of a difference. On the other hand, the Note 8 Pro produced images that represented the scene much more accurately, but is able to get more vibrant colors that are close to the Galaxy A51 with this AI mode on. So overall, the Note 8 Pro produced sharper images with more details, especially in its full 64 megapixel mode versus the A51's 48 megapixel images. So while megapixels don't always matter, it does seem to produce better results here. The A51's ultra wide angle camera has a wider field of view, but does show more distortion around the edges even with the lens correction feature enabled. It also still produces photos with more vibrant colors, with the Note 8 Pro again representing the scene more accurately. Now, moving on to the macro cameras, they're both capable and fun to use, but the Note 8 Pro again produced sharper images in more detail. So here I would go with the Note 8 Pro macro camera. Finally, both have variable portrait mode, enabling you to adjust the amount of background blur, but the Note 8 Pro is able to blur the background more at its highest setting. Edge detection isn't perfect, but fairly good in each phone. Also, the Note 8 Pro is able to again produce better colors with more detail. Moving on to the rear camera video, the A51 has autofocus issues with some focus hunting and slower focusing speed. It also does not have 60 frames per second at 1080p, while the Note 8 Pro does. Colors at 1080p resolution are interestingly about the same. Also, audio is quite good on both with pretty similar quality. Lastly, for some reason, colors in 4K on the Note 8 Pro are completely overblown and just don't look good at all. So switching to the front cameras, photos on the Note 8 Pro are sharper with more detail, while the A51 is brighter but producing softer images. Portrait mode results are pretty much the same as the rear cameras, with the Note 8 Pro able to blur more of the background with similar edge detection results on each phone. Lastly, the front camera videos are similar to the photo quality, where the A51 video is brighter but softer, while the Note 8 Pro produces more accurate representation of the scene and is just sharper overall. The audio again is good on both phones and fairly similar in quality. Unfortunately, each of the cameras blow out the light in the background, which is not uncommon with most camera phones. So in summary, I prefer the Redmi Note 8 cameras for everything except for 4K video. That's not to say the Galaxy A51 cameras aren't good. They produce nice images with pretty good video quality, but I personally prefer the colors and details from the Note 8 Pro. Anyway, that's just what I think about how these cameras performed. Let me know what you think and which cameras you thought performed better and which you prefer in the comments, and let's continue the conversation down there. Any other questions or comments, leave them down below. And as always, thanks for watching.